First, this half hour, flags are flying at half-mast across the country in honour of the 6 victims killed in Saturday's mass stabbing at Bondi Junction in Sydney. Police have confirmed Queenslander Joel Couchy was the attacker, and investigations underway. Overnight, 50 additional witnesses came forward, and police are urging anyone who hasn't yet spoken to officials to speak with them. Dr Terry Goldsworthy is an Associate Professor in Criminology and Criminal Justice at Bondi University, and Terry is also a major crime detective working with Queensland Police for 28 years. He's told News Radio many people are understandably still in shock.
We're not used to these mass events, and that's because they are actually quite rare in Australia. So when they happen, they do tend to, gain the public's attention in ways that we don't want. But in reality, I think we were probably lucky that the police response was so quick and so effective in stopping the offender from carrying out any more attacks on people in the shopping centre, because he would have probably deliberately picked that type of area in terms of the potential victims that he could have inflicted harm on. And I think the responses by the police and also members of the public should be recognised for the way in which they contained that threat and ended the threat.
You're a former major crime detective. Can you give us an idea what goes through the mind of a police officer when responding to an incident like this?
Well, I think any of the police responding there, but certainly the inspector, the officer who interacted with the offender and shot him, would be a sense of what is happening. I mean, these things happen very quickly. They have a lack of information in terms of what they need to do. And I mean, I guess in terms of an active armed offender, the focus of the police these days is that the response needs to reduce or suppress the threat posed by that active armed offender as quickly as possible. We saw footage of the officer moving through the shopping centre very quickly, people directing her to where he was. So she, I guess, would have been going there and then thinking about what is the threat level of the person I'm coming towards. She's not in a position to aid casualties. I mean, the priority has to be dealing with the threat. So there's a lot of unknowns for officers going in there, and I guess the biggest concern would be what will be the reaction of the offender when he's confronted by the police.
We're hearing this morning that forensic officers have finished their investigations overnight. Can you give us an idea just how complex this kind of operation is?
Yeah, look, I mean, you would have multiple crime scenes within the shopping centre. So, they declared the whole shopping centre a crime scene and closed it down. And I guess that would just been to ensure that they can go through it thoroughly without any members of the public being there to contaminate it or anything like that. So they would have had a fairly clear idea of where they would need to look through the CCTV in the centre itself and where the location of the casualties were. So my understanding is that crime scene's now been released, but they would have processed all of those individual crime scenes individually where people were attacked, etc., and just gathered that evidence up for the coronial inquiry. And they'll now move on, I guess, from the physical evidence process. The autopsies will be conducted this week at some stage, and then there'll be the investigation continuing in relation to witnesses of the events that occurred on the weekend, and then also getting information from associates and family of the offender to build up a picture of why this may have happened, what was his motivation.
I'm also keen to know about what happens to the items taken from the scene. Police Commissioner Karen Webb says that it could take months to investigate items that have been removed from the shopping centre. So what will officers be looking at?
Well, yeah, I mean, primarily they'll be looking for evidence in terms of forensic evidence. So it depends on what processes are done to those items, whether they're in a state to be returned. And some items, obviously, family, etc., wouldn't want returned anyway, I would think, given the state they may be in. So it's really hard to be definitive on that one because of the variation of the items taken. Things like CCTV, computers or things like that could be returned very quickly. Other items which are being examined may need to go to experts, etc., to determine the value of them in terms of forensic evidence, physical evidence for the coronial inquiry. So there'll be a wide variation in terms of when those items can be returned and if they will be returned.
We're learning more about 40-year-old Joel Cauchi, who was from Queensland. His family have released a statement saying that he's battled with mental health issues since he was a teenager. If an officer suspects an offender has a mental health condition, how does that impact how they respond to a live incident?
Yeah, look, mental health does feature prominently in, some offences of violence. We know somewhere between 30 and 60% of prisoners have diagnosed or undiagnosed mental health issues. In terms of when police are responding to people with a mental health issue, there are protocols around how they should approach them in terms of communication, confrontation, and obviously the aim should be to de-escalate. But the problem is, someone who's got a knife and is actively going around stabbing people is just as dangerous as someone who's got a knife doing that without a mental health condition. So there is limitations on when police can take that de-escalation approach to dealing with people with mental health issues who are armed. So if this person was, in a area by themselves, not threatening anyone, perhaps threatening self-harm, there'd be no reason for the police to move in towards him. They could de-escalate. Where you have in this situation, as indicated by the CCTV, this person is moving through the shopping centre looking for potential victims and attacking those victims. The options for the police are substantially reduced. The use of a taser in instances like this is just not practical because of the risk to the officers in it not deploying properly or not taking down the offender. So in reality, in this case, I think the use of the firearm is the only option available to them. And prima facie, I would say that the use of the firearm would be justified, but that'll be something the coroner will look at and make a determination as well.
Terry, after an event such as this takes place, what support is made available to first responders? Because some of the details of this incident are very harrowing. Yeah,
look, we used to have what we call human services officers, which would come and debrief officers after they'd been involved in what we call a critical incident, which is what this is. So I'm not sure about what New South Wales Police has in particular, but there would be a psychologist or counsellors available to officers who had attended to make sure that they're in an appropriate space as to what went on, because, this can be traumatic for the first responders as it was for many of the witnesses and the survivors of the victims, etc. So I think there will be a lot of support put in place by the New South Wales Police for their officers to ensure that they all progress past and come out the other end of this incident with minimal impact on them.
And we're hearing this morning that security has been boosted at a major shopping centre in Queensland, but there's no intelligence about an increased threat. This incident has shaken people up all over the country. Can Australians in and out of Sydney feel safe going about their daily routines today?
Oh, certainly. I think the mass murder or mass killing incidents are quite rare. If we, the last major mass stabbing incident we had was in 2014, and that was a woman who stabbed to death 8 children. I don't think we've had one since then. If you go back and look at shootings, there was a study done that looked at mass shootings that occurred in Australia between 1964 and 2014. And I think it worked out about every 4 years there was some kind of mass shooting event. We're talking there about 4 more people being killed. So they are quite rare. I think, we are a safe country. People should be confident in going around in public spaces. The data just shows that there's not an overwhelming threat to people doing that. The weekend just highlights that, things do happen sometimes. There's very little that we can do to prevent them from happening, but what we can do is reduce the amount of harm that is conducted or done by the offenders when they're doing these type of acts.
That's Associate Professor in Criminology and Criminal Justice at Bondi University, former Queensland detective as well, Terry Goldsworthy. He was speaking with ABC News.